Okay, my name's Robert Chappell, and I'm going to be talking about archaeology and Tableau, a case study. And I was rather expecting to have fewer people here that actually knew who I was. And so, just to give you a quick overview, outside of work, I describe myself as a recovering archaeologist. I spent over 20 years working in commercial field archaeology. I couldn't take it anymore. I left in 2011 and I retrained in IT, and this company was good enough to take me in. And these days I work in data visualizations, but still maintain some research interest. And I'm going to take you back more than 10 years ago. One night in 2006, I was at home writing up an excavation report of this site you see here on the left. It's a burnt mound, or Fulloch Fia, in a place called Grantia outside Derry, or Londonderry, whichever you prefer to call it. Burnt mounds are really interesting sites. You have a big hole in the ground called a trough. You heat up stones in a fire, you drop the stones into the water eventually boils, you end up with lots of shattered stones, and you use the water for cooking, for brewing, for washing. They're generally of the Bronze Age. That's about 2350 to 650 BC. And when you're writing one of these up, there's a lot of different ways to go about it, but one of the most common ways is to look at the morphology. So you're looking at the shape, you're looking at the size. And the one on the left here, you can see those are 50 centimeter bars on, or breakups on 2 meter bars. The trough is subrectangular, it's quite deep, there's lots and lots of layers in it. And so you compare this morphology to other similar sites that have subrectangular, deep troughs with lots of layers. Possibly you compare it to other sites on the same scheme you're working on, maybe in the same county. But back in 2006, the thing that was going on in the back of my head was I had another site to write up, this site here on the right, Balloch in County Dublin. I had gotten the radiocarbon dates for it. I knew it was coming up that I had to write it up soon. And the dates were really, really close. But as you can see, this one had a very shallow trough. It was subcircular, or nearly circular, and quite shallow, single fill. No amount of this morphological research would bring these two sites together, even though in real terms the chronology is very close. And this is where I had my what if moment. What if I could create a new research pathway by comparing the radiocarbon dates, not just the morphology? And I just thought it'd be something a bit more interesting, a bit more, given a bit more value. Now, don't be afraid, this is not here comes the science, but just to give you an idea of what is a radiocarbon date. Archaeologists collect carbon in the form of charcoal from charred wood or burnt cereals. It's taken away to a laboratory, and the radioactive carbon-14 radioisotope is measured. It decays at a known half-life, and basically comparing what's left versus what should be there, it comes back as a number. So it's a number, a plus or minus sign, a number, and then BP. So the number is how many years, radiocarbon years ago we reckon this is. The plus or minus indicates that there's an error in our date, so it's 22 years plus or minus on either side of that. And BP stands for before present. For archaeologists, present is the year 1950. Long story, don't ask. And so it is. These are in radiocarbon years. These have to be calibrated against a certain curve. Again, very, very complex process to turn it into real calendar years. So that date of 2456 plus or minus 22 turns out in calendar years to be the period from 753 to 416 Cal BC. Now that's the core of it. There's a lot of other associated metadata with it, and that was my idea. Compare that date to that date, see what's contemporary. But there's a big problem, and the problem is the data. The dates are scattered, generally in 1s, 2s, and 3s, across a variety of books, of journals, and reports. These are grey literature reports that aren't officially published, and they're generally hard to get hold of. Even well-selling academic books are only in limited print runs. They may be locked away in research libraries. If it's an academic journal, it may be behind a paywall, and a lot of these grey literature reports may exist only on somebody's hard drive. So they can be pretty hard to get. I had a very simple solution. And like simple solutions everywhere, they're actually kind of stupid, but this one worked. So here we have, this is me in my library. I have been collecting books since I was an undergraduate over 30 years ago. And I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll start with my own library and I'll go from there. And I called it the Irish Radiocarbon and Dendrochronological Dates Project, because you know what, you just can't beat a snappy title. The current version has over 8,000 radiocarbon dates and another 300 or so dendro dates. These are tree ring dates. Now, everybody these days in IT is talking about big data. This is less than 9,000 lines. This is not big data. This doesn't even qualify as small data. This is bijou data. And it may, from an IT perspective, sound like it's easy to dismiss. However, every single one of those dates has a dollar amount attached to it, because to get these had to be collected, they had to be sent off to a lab and processed, and the data extracted. I did a little bit of very quick calculation using the most modern figures, an average of what you pay, which is a lot cheaper now than it used to be in the past. And I came up with that at an absolute base level, this is worth almost £3 million worth of data. It's a small amount of data in real terms, but it's actually worth a lot of money. Now, from an archaeological perspective, what's it really worth? Well, one date dates one thing, so that from that pit or post hole there, you get a date for that. You get enough dates, you can start forming a chronology for phasing of a full site or for a landscape. But what can you do if you have lots and lots and lots of dates from across this island? Well, one of the things that I do is a technique called Radiocarbon Landscapes. And the idea is to create narratives around the idea of integrated data meshes, where you can make connections between contemporary events across the island. So we talked earlier about burnt mounds. So you can start pulling out all similar burnt mounds of the same date. But on top of that, you can, and that doesn't matter about their morphology, whether they're the same shapes and sizes, you can just start pulling back burnt mounds. You can also bring in burials and settlements, other things that regular research isn't going to bring you back, to give you this much more cohesive and idea of what Ireland was like at that particular time. And I think it is a more holistic approach to archaeological research, and it's one that can pay dividends, but it's not like a research silver bullet. Now, that's case one where I'm using it. What I did next was this is, by the way, is just in a Excel spreadsheet. I very much take the opinion that I am the curator of this data, not its owner. And since it's been freely downloadable since about 2010, prior to that I used to give it away to anybody who emailed me. It's been used by some really high-impact INSTAR, these are Irish National Strategic Archaeological Research Projects. It's been used by Professor Stephen Shannon in his prehistoric demography project at University College London. It's a core text in at least 2 undergraduate university courses that I'm aware of, and for various projects it has been used by more undergraduates, master's students and PhDs than I can easily remember anymore. I am really, really proud of it. But there is a problem with this, in that this is very, very specialized data, even for archaeologists. A lot of my time in archaeology was actually writing about how difficult this is and how archaeologists need to use this data better. And while a lot of my professional work at that time was looking to try and increase archaeological usage and care in the use of this data, it very much excludes interested non-specialists. And I thought, how do I reach out to them? And again, without dumbing it down, without being childish about it. And this is where Tableau as a data visualization tool came in. So a couple of years ago, I manually added geolocations for every Irish radiocarbon date, all 8,000 of them. I then spent part of the autumn of 2015 creating these visualizations in Tableau Public. So we had, at that stage, over 10 years of manual data gathering, 3 months of data coding, or data geocoding, and 1 week at that time putting together the visualizations. And at the top level, I wanted this to speak to interested non-specialists. And what you see here is a map of Ireland. Every single dot you see there is a radiocarbon date. And the way it's laid out here is on the right-hand side, you have the Irish counties. You can select down to individual counties. Below that, you can select archaeological ages. Either at the top level, you can perhaps select the Neolithic. Below that, it's more granular. You can break that down to the early, middle, or late Neolithic. And this is what I wanted to give to the non-specialist audience, that they could bring that down for them, and to allow access to that local level data that is usually not available to local level studies. And I use this phrase, it's to bring an appreciation of deep time archaeology to parish level research. And that's what I want to do for the non-specialist audience. For the professional archaeologist, I wanted to bring a set of pro tools, essentially. Again, running off the same data set, and give them tools to look at landscape and time periods, much more granular tools where you can actually look at this not by preset time periods, but down to individual dates calculated either in calibrated years or dates BP. And what I found with this was that by adding the visualizations to what was, I think we're safe to say, a fairly worthy, well-researched data set, it brought back really strong positive reactions from both professionals and non-professionals. And I'm going to move to something completely different. Away from Ireland, I got my hands with the permission of the owners of this data, something kind of similar for radiocarbon and non-radiocarbon archaeological dates from Australia. Put this together and you can now interrogate it. And again, got the same sort of reactions, that it gave this value to be able to see it visually and to interact with it. That's a data set that was originally published in Internet Archaeology. And then ends up with this one. This is a data set that came from Quaternary Science Review, and again, with the permission of the owners. This is a data set that relates to testate amoeba. Testate amoeba are unicellular shell protozoa, and they're used in the reconstruction of hydrological variability across Europe. So it gives us an idea of past time frames of what landscape, how it evolved and how it changed. And one of the interesting things about this particular visualization was that it was the data set was published, but within a few minutes of visualizing it, I realized that there were errors in the data. That was allowed to be fed back, and the data set was changed accordingly. Now, these are things I just want to tie together with a few key takeaways. The first one is that if you put effort in creating a data source, if you do nothing more than that, there will be other people that will find it of use and of value. So where you can, be generous with your data. Second one, if you add a visualization over the top of this, it can add value for existing users and bring in and engage new users. And the final one I'd say is that, and this is kind of where it brings it back to an all-states appropriate topic, is that the skills I've learned here doing data visualization, I have applied them in my personal life to what is essentially these days a hobby, done something valuable there, but the skills I've learned then in doing all these other visualizations have fed back directly into what I do at work. So it's a continuing loop, it's a continuing series of learning. And I would end with that, just to say thank you very much for listening. If anybody's interested in any of these, all you've seen here and so many more can be found on my Tableau public page. I have a number of publications if anybody wants to read about archaeology or carbon dating. And because one blog isn't enough, I have two, one on archaeological matters and another on data. So with that, I say thank you very much.